Thank you. It is 8:33, and we are going to call this meeting of the EDT Committee to order. Uh, my name is John Morrissey. I am the committee chair for City Council on this committee. With me are my fellow council members, Councilmember Fenton and Chang. And I don't even have a view to see who else is on here. So let's do some additional introductions. Who else is here?
Joe from Keat is here.
I see Joe. Thank you, Joe. And then staff.
Nick Bond, Community Development Director for the city.
Jim Fisk, Principal Planner.
Connor Dahlquist, Associate Planner.
Excellent. I think that's all I have. Perfect. Thank you for the introductions. Let's move straight into the agenda today. And it looks like who's taking MFTE?
I will start. Jim's going to go ahead and share his screen, and we have two things to talk about. One of them is the target area, which is the area on the map that would be eligible for MFTE under the proposed framework. And then there are the code changes from the previously repealed MFTE chapter. We presented these materials to the Land Use Committee about a week and a half ago, and we did receive some feedback on the map from the Land Use Committee, and I'll explain what that is. But first, to develop the target area for multifamily tax exemption, we wanted to start as a baseline by mapping our designated centers from our comprehensive plan. State law says that residential target areas under the MFTE statute have to be within designated urban centers. Urban centers are not defined. We do also have, through the PSRC framework, our regional and countywide centers, which are a little bit different. But I think, it seems like these are intended to be in more concentrated areas of development, but City Council gets to define what an urban center is under the MFTE statute, and it does not have to match what's in your comprehensive plan. So we started with the comp plan centers, and then we made some minor changes in the areas around downtown where we have more of a gridded street network. So going out Perry and Farragut along the water, and then also up Sherman in all the areas, all the way basically up to Tremont, where you have more of a street grid and you could do some infill type development. We have added those to the centers map. So you'll see that the Ruby Creek Center is on here, the two Bethel centers are on here, the Mile Hill Center is on here, and then our downtown and Tremont centers are on here, plus some areas adjacent to downtown and Tremont where we've expanded the boundaries. And so we felt like this was a good area for targeting MFTE because most of these areas include zoning that would allow for taller buildings, either mixed-use shopfront style buildings or apartment buildings. And then there's a number of lots that would allow for infill development under middle housing. And part of the code revision is to target those smaller projects, the infill projects that would be 12 or fewer units. So, or between 4 and 12 units, I should say. So, this is kind of where we started our discussion. And one thing that you'll notice is that our high school is within the center, the courthouse is within the center. There's a number of non-residential properties that are in this map. And so we have not taken those out of the map. The Land Use Committee is recommending that we go ahead and do that because we don't want to indicate to somebody that they can develop housing on land where otherwise the zoning doesn't permit it. That is a bit of an exercise for us to go through. Some of our parcels have split zoning when they're along like the Blackjack Creek Ravine. Part of them are in a green belt and part are in a residential zone. And so we have to we were having discussion about whether you include only part of a parcel as eligible for MFTE versus the whole thing. I think we need to make the map show that the entire parcel is eligible, even only if a portion of it would be zoned for multifamily housing. But I wanted to hand this over to you to discuss and see if this feels about right in terms of our target areas for potentially bringing back the multifamily tax exemption program. And once we get done discussing the map, we can get into the code.
Sure. Okay. Mr. Bond, let's talk. So number one, can we designate different areas in the city? So if So there's three potential MFTEs that we could look at. Could we say that if we wanted to do one that maybe goes a little further, you could do that in just one subsection of the city? Let me give you my thought process, Mr. Brown. Like we had MFTE in the past, and we didn't get it in one of the focused areas we're looking for, which is our downtown area. Would we be able to have a subsection where we can give maybe a 12-year versus the 8, because that would go further because we haven't seen any of that type of activity, or is that not possible?
Well, we did have it set up that way in the old MFTE code. And so the way that this is set up now is that any MFTE, whether it's 8 or 12 years, is available in all of the areas shaded in green. So if you wanted to narrow this and say that only 8-year MFTE is allowed downtown, but 12-year is allowed everywhere else, you could do that. But I think that we were trying to simplify the code rather than making it more complicated. And when we get into the criteria, what you'll see is that, in order to qualify for MFTE, you have to do one of 4 things, which is either provide a mixed use building, provide development that's 4 stories or higher, do an infill middle housing project, or meet a minimum density, if my memory serves me correctly from the draft ordinance. And then on top of that, if you want to go from 8 to 12, you also have to provide affordable housing. So to get that extra 4 years, you're providing affordable housing in addition to all of the other requirements. So the idea behind that was that we wanted to try to encourage higher value projects so that the citizens of Port Orchard actually get a return on investment long term. And but if you wanted to move away from that framework and just say, you know what, we need development downtown so much that we're going to allow it no strings attached any residential project downtown that otherwise complies with state law for MFTE would be eligible for MFTE and doesn't have to do one of those things. You could create a separate map with a separate set of criteria, but we would have to rework the structure of the code.
Okay. And I mean, I'm hearing a little bit that's going to put some burden on staff if we do choose to go down that route.
Yeah, I think it's easier for people to understand to say that to qualify for this, you got to do one of these 4 things. And if you want an extra 4 years, it's affordable housing on top of that. That's relatively straightforward. I think our old program was a little bit complex because some areas we were targeting redevelopment versus new development. And when it was redevelopment, you had lesser requirements than if it was new requirement under the old code. I think this simplifies things quite a bit.
And then before I turn it over to somebody else, I see, and I'm trying to think through that little corridor. So the only part, is obviously the Sedgwick corridor on the west side of Highway 16. Was there any thought, and did we think about maybe connecting those 2 green parts along Pottery/Sydney Road there?
So on Pottery Sydney, this gray area is actually the unincorporated county. It's not annexed by the city yet.
That's
So
right.
there is one piece here, this triangle that is not in the MFTE zone that's in between 2 centers. You could potentially add those 4 or 5 parcels that are in white here, that triangle. But otherwise, there's not a whole lot to add along that frontage.
And which one of those parcels is there already put some potential activity going on?
Well, we have some applications in, and the sewer line extension on Pottery now is for this property, but they're making the decision to go forward with their project without MFTE. So, it seems like it's viable on its own and probably doesn't need the subsidy.
I wasn't sure where that landed over. I knew it's in that general vicinity, but not particular parcel. So, okay.
Yeah, I think the one area you mentioned Sedgwick, but going west from Sedgwick here down the hill where Multicare was looking at doing an emergency room and where you have Bravo Terrace, there are some areas down here, although some of this is now tribal land because the tribe has purchased it. But there is the potential there to expand to include Bravo Terrace and then that area on the north side of Sedgwick between Blackjack Creek and the road. So that would be one possible area where you could add a few parcels if you wanted to expand the parcel boundary.
And we have that where it could be mixed use or anything over there that's commercial zoned? I thought.
I'm going to check the zoning map before I answer that to make sure
Okay.
that I'm giving you correct information.
Uh,
Jim, do you recall whether that's commercial mixed use or commercial heavy?
I think it's commercial heavy.
commercial.
So it doesn't allow residential development
Okay.
there, so never mind.
Okay. So it wouldn't make sense. Okay, perfect. Thank you for answering my questions. Councilmember Fenton. You're muted. You're muted, friend.
There. On the map, go ahead and take it down a little bit smaller, or is that, or over by the waterfront is for, well, one thing, is that the school right there? The one that has that great big, you said
Yep.
the school's in here, so. Oh, that's the high school right there where you're pointing at?
Yep.
Oh, okay. And then, so I'd be kind of be curious to go along the waterfront to see what's not developed. Is this green showing that it's not developed? And
No,
so,
so this would allow redevelopment, and remember the middle housing, if somebody wants to come in and build 4 townhomes where one house is, this is a way to incentivize that sort of behavior. And so, we have quite a few houses that are in pretty poor condition in that area. And so this would potentially make it cost effective to redevelop those homes. But yeah, most of that is developed. There are certainly a handful of vacant properties, but not many.
no, yeah, not very, I didn't think there's that many along the waterfront. But, and with that said, I mean, this is a big map that we're putting out. Can we also, I thought we could also designate like zones, certain zones that this is for the multifamily tax exemption.
Everything in the green is where he's saying that we can.
Those are all just
is the zone.
zones.
Yeah.
They're just the
So
zones.
I was asking, can we create a second zone? He's saying potentially we could. I think I have an appetite to discuss that specifically for the downtown, but I got to find 3 others to agree with me.
Yeah, well, I'd like to definitely look at it a little bit more too. Yeah, sure.
Councilmember Chang, any questions?
Actually, I have a couple of comments. I'm still wrestling about the justification for MFT in the first place because I see it as a tax shift that we have to be very careful about. We're exempting developers from the property tax that they would incur for their improvement, and we're shifting that on to all the other taxpayers. So I have a little heartburn about that the projects that we do give this exemption to should really be something significant for the city. And I appreciate, Nick, what you said about we are aiming for higher value properties. So I know that in the long term with higher value properties, that would increase the property tax, down the line after 8 or 12 years. So I get that long range goal, but in the short term, I'm a little leery of this tax shift unless it's, I'm sorry, let me turn that off. A project that I think really benefits the city. My first impression of the map is that there are just too many areas where this would be eligible. And the way I look at it is that, if we wanted to channel the redevelopment to downtown and maybe certain areas, as a developer, I would of course go for the easier area to develop, like near Fred Meyer, which is exactly what Pottery Creek did in their first development. And so my overall impression of the map is that I think we would need to really focus on the areas where we really want the development. And I see the 4 criteria of, the structured parking and the mixed use, and I agree with that. But I think realistically, I would want to focus it on much fewer areas. So if it were up to me, I would uncolor the map and make the green areas, I would pick very different and fewer of the green areas. So that's sort of my comments on this. Also, it seems like we're not really, I guess the red lines are the only changes to the ordinance from the previous one.
Correct.
Okay.
I indicated notes. I deleted some large sections of text, so I've just notated where I've made changes or why I've made changes, but the new language is all in underline. So
Okay.
because this ordinance was repealed, we are adopting a clean new ordinance. I was just trying to highlight what was done and where it was done in the from compared to the old code.
Okay.
So I might just share with you, Councilmember Chang, kind of my perspective on this because you know, I think there's a balance to everything, and I think this is where I like MFTE because we put 100% of that burden on the development to connect into our sewer structure, our water structure, those connection fees, and those impact fees that hit those developers so hard, and then we benefit off of that as a city for that. I think there's a give and take there because the folks that live here benefit off of the new businesses, the new roads and things that come out of this. You can look at some of the things that we've had happen recently that they invest in our community. And so I think that there's the ability to give a break to help make housing affordable. And I know I said we're going to quit trying to use that term. I'm going to use reasonable, but I'm going to look at a project. I don't remember what we're calling it down there now at the end of Port Orchard or the Boulevard there at Port Orchard. The BJC's doing. We're getting curb and fixes and they're helping install some of the sidewalk down there. Those are tangible benefits to our community that they're having to pay for, and I think a multifamily tax exemption helps offset that, so that we can have all types of housing in our house. That's how I wrap my head around it, because I hear what you're saying about the tax shift and being able to speak to people about that, and that's just how I do that. And then to me, other than the focused areas where I really want to make sure I have it, I'd like to have it at least the 12 open to the whole city, and really put the 8 on the downtown that's way more flexible. But those are my personal feelings. Councilmember Fenton?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised how much green is along the waterfront. And I mean, the people I talk to, they don't want to turn that downtown into, you know, Ruston Way or something, you know, big. They like our little small town on the waterfront. And so I would still want to pursue what those houses are, or look down there even a little bit more so, for sure, along the waterfront.
So I just shared the zoning map, and I want to remind everyone that just because it's green on the MFTE map, the areas that are the light yellow color are R2. And so you're getting a maximum of 4 units there. So you're talking about 4 townhomes replacing a house, not a large apartment building. And so really the only areas where you're seeing the potential, more potential than that is in the red and the orange color, not this whole area out Perry and Farragut. Is all pretty low density, as well as everything above downtown here and around Clayton Park. That's really targeting that 4 to 12 unit infill project, not any larger multifamily.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Anderson.
Can you hear me okay? Because we're talking through one of our cell phones.
We got you.
Okay, good. Well, I just wanted to give some support to Councilman Morrissey's comments about the need for the MFTE. The increase in the, as you appropriately stated, and the impact fees and all the connection fees in Port Orchard are very high. And I've had developers who are very good developers walk away from projects because it just doesn't pencil here. Even using the current lease rates that we have here that everybody believes is fairly strong, it still doesn't always make financial sense to do so in this market. We have to recognize that Port Orchard, even though it's improving and the population is increasing, is still an in-between market. It doesn't have the economic vitality that Silverdale or Gig Harbor does, because we are an in-between market. So we can't, you can't justify, building to a very high level here as from a developer standpoint and still make it pencil. So I think we need something like the MFTE to help encourage developers to take on these projects if we want to see nice products in our city. And I think your point about Nick, about the waterfront area, it's always challenging and very expensive to build down there. So nobody's going to do anything down there unless it's financially viable, and it's even tougher on the waterfront than it is in the rest of the city. I did want to ask in your mapping also that over on the piece of property that James He owns, which is not commercial heavy, it's the residentially zoned property behind, why that was not included in the FTE.
Yeah, and that's because it's not within one of our designated centers.
Oh, it's got to be in one of your centers. So okay.
Well, it doesn't have to be in one of the centers per state law. That was just sort of a starting point for creating a map. And so it's up to the city council to choose if and where to expand those urban center boundaries for our designated target areas.
Okay. Is it an area that would be considered if it was brought forward?
Where is it?
Yeah, I don't know where you're talking exactly, Gary, but
You know where the China Sun Buffet is?
yes.
Yeah,
Your
off of Bethel.
cursor is on it right now.
Yep.
Okay.
So the piece that's on the Bethel Road frontage is commercial heavy, so it couldn't qualify, but the piece behind is residential high.
Yeah,
Okay.
and quite honestly, I think an argument could be made to add quite a few of the properties here at Salmonberry and Bethel to the map. I think once you go a little bit further west on Salmonberry to get to those residential subdivisions, leave those areas out. But we've got a property that has a major culvert and flooding issue there at the corner of Salmonberry Road where our new roundabout's about to go. And then Crawford Road, we've had tons of code enforcement. Encouraging redevelopment in this area wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but ultimately council determines the map, and I'll leave it to them to.
So that whole
advise.
section, it kind of slopes off, doesn't it? If I'm thinking right, is that why some on the other side on the of Bethel there, Nick, on the right side? Yeah, where your cursor is there. That all kind of slopes. Was that kind of some of the thought, or it just didn't fit in one of the centers, so we didn't look at it?
It's not in one of the centers. So
Okay.
when we were designating our centers too, part of this is we have to meet certain criteria to qualify as a center, which includes being 10 units per acre. So putting a large vacant piece of property into the center before it develops actually brought us below the criteria so that we wouldn't be eligible and it would hurt our transportation funding application. So that's why the He property is left out. Had it been developed, we probably would have included it.
And would there be any future discussion, because that looks like they're two separate centers today, for it all to potentially just be one Bethel corridor center, or no?
PSRC has criteria for the maximum size of a center, and that's why it's broken into two. And so we tried to separate them in the comp plan.
Okay. Councilmember Chang, do you see that at any point? I mean, when I'm looking at that long term, Bethel's all gonna, it's gonna grow right along our main corridor there.
I think those areas should be added if we're keeping the other areas, but I have a question for Nick, which is, if the ordinance were to go into effect, would council have any discretion on each individual project, or would they just automatically be approved?
Well, council approves any MFTE agreement, so each agreement comes to council for approval before it goes into effect. But you're only evaluating it against the criteria that you've adopted. If they put forward a development that meets the criteria, I think you have an obligation to approve it under the code.
So there isn't a lot of discretion to say evaluate if we feel it would give a lot of benefit. And I appreciate what Gary said about the development, the impact fees, but I would also say that we had a really good development, the Haven apartments on Pottery Creek, which were developed without MFTE. So we know that it is possible. Is there any justification, Nick, do you think, to shrink these areas to focus on downtown or the more difficult to develop areas?
Well, that wasn't the direction that I heard in our discussion at work study, and so the instructions that I got were to go forward and draft something that would be more expansive. But I think just because these areas are big doesn't mean that there's a lot of sites that are going to use them. I mean, you've got residential subdivisions that are in these center boundaries that, like the brand new Blueberry and Indazio subdivisions, nobody's going to tear down one of those new houses and um, uh, build apartments.
Right.
The existing Blueberry I mean, there's existing apartment projects that are in here that are unlikely to be modified. I mean, it's possible they could try to squeeze in more units if they had, a small amount of available property, but it's pretty unlikely that most of these are going to develop. Um, I think we should move into the discussion of the criteria. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Can I do one last question, Nick?
Yeah.
Before we move on to that, we had the one project over off the other side of Highway 16. Was there ever thought to I think it's stalled at the moment over off of Old Clifton.
Yeah, Diaz Meadows.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the name.
Yeah, it isn't proposed to be included, but you certainly could include it. But as permitted or as laid out, it wouldn't qualify because it's not a 4-story project. It's only a 3-story project. And so that's the same thing for Hidden Hills, is Hidden Hills is permitted as a 3-story building, not a 4-story project. And that's part of our goal with this is let's ask for more out of the development so that long term we're actually getting a return on having granted this initial relief.
Yep.
I did meet with the KBA a couple of weeks ago, and they basically said, like, we appreciate you're doing this, and we especially like it for the middle housing stuff. But we think that requiring 4 stories for MFTE, you're probably not going to get a lot of takers because it's too expensive to put in an elevator. And I think that's good because it means that we're making it. We really are trying to get a return on this. We have a lot of development. We're probably growing as fast as we should be right now relative to our growth targets. And if somebody wants MFTE, we definitely want to get something in return for it. And there may not be many takers, and that's okay. But I think we're being we're falling in the middle because the builders aren't thrilled with the proposal, but we are bringing the proposal back in some capacity, and we'll have to wait and see whether anybody will actually take us up on it.
I think it's going to be the perfect middle where nobody's happy, and we've threaded that needle perfectly. So, okay, let's move to the content portion.
Yeah. So the ordinance, as I mentioned, I highlighted the sections that changed, and we did strike through, or we did underline for new text. But in section 3.48060 project eligibility, we've added a new subsection 6. And this says that to qualify for any MFTE, whether it's 8 or 12 years, you have to do one of these 4 things, A through D. The first of them is that you're building a mixed-use shopfront building, meaning that there is commercial space in the ground floor, and we set a minimum of 4,000 square feet or 40% of the building's footprint, whichever is less. So if you were to do a small project downtown, maybe you don't even have a 4,000 square foot lot, you can still qualify for it, but we want to make sure that there's some minimum level of commercial space. And I will say that, my experience where I live, there are buildings getting MFTE certificates that are mixed use that are including basically a residential lobby, not retail or restaurant space, that are qualifying for MFTE. And so this is really, we want space that is going to generate economic activity in order to qualify under A. Under B, we're saying that the multifamily housing project would be at least 4 stories or 40 units per acre. And so we've lowered our parking standards, which means that it is easier to hit 40 units per acre, but 40 units per acre is still a pretty large number. It's I think the Haven townhomes is about 30 units per acre. And so presumably if you added the 4th floor, you're going to get there, but it really depends. You can meet the minimum parking requirements within that footprint, but the market may dictate that you need more parking than that. And so this may also include some underground parking. And so again, we're being pretty aggressive in trying to get a higher value project here than what is otherwise happening under free market conditions here in Port Orchard. The third alternative, this is the middle housing alternative, which is if you have a lot that is smaller than 15,000 square feet and you want to redevelop with between 4 and 12 units, you would qualify. And so this doesn't have a height requirement, but this is really taking, we have a lot of code enforcement cases in the city. If there's a house that has major violations that gets torn down, you could replace it with 4 or 12, up to 12 units if the zoning allows. And you don't, again, have a height requirement there. And then the final qualification is you could get a 3-story project approved, provided that 100% of the parking is below grade. And so there are some areas of the city that don't have a parking requirement, like in downtown along Bay Street. So you could build a project that provides 0 parking and 100% of it is below grade because 100% of 0 is 0. But this would allow for shorter buildings, but it's going to ensure that you have very high lot coverage and very high assessed valuation per acre. And so it is a more valuable project for the city compared to having that surface parking, which is taking up valuable land and not really creating taxable valuation. So those are the 4 criteria. And then under item 7, this is the additional performance standards to get a 12-year exemption. And so on top of choosing one of those 4 things, you would also have to provide 20% of the units, at least 25% below fair market rent. The KBA did indicate that they thought that this was too high. They think that most developers are going to look at this and say, I can invest the money that I was otherwise going to invest in Port Orchard and get a higher return elsewhere. And this is not something that they would want to take us up on. I think that we certainly need to be higher than the 10% that this used to be under the previous code. But whether council wants to revise it down to 20 or 15%, I will leave that up to you. I'm hearing from the builders that they don't think this is going to get us any affordable units. But we can always try, and if nobody takes us up on it, we could adjust it later. And I will remind you that there is a high administrative cost on the affordable units because we have a ton of work to do in reporting and auditing to make sure that folks are complying with these agreements. So that's essentially this is really the meat of the new framework is choose one of those 4 things, and then you can get an extra 4 years for affordable housing.
And remind me, we haven't had anybody take us up on the 12-year when we had it.
No, we had 3 projects go forward where 10% of units were below the median rent, and it was at 20% of units were affordable, and they had to be 10% below fair market rent for 12 years. So we've had 3 projects take us up on that.
Okay. Can I ask, and you tell me whether this is feasible or not, when we bring this to full council, can we look at the dollars for just one of those projects that did use the 12 in their abatement, and then what it cost them to be at that, what revenue they lost, and then maybe can we apply that same situation to a project that didn't take advantage of it, like maybe the Haven, and see if it would have been beneficial. I think there's some education for us as council members to understand what asking the difference between 25% versus 10 would look like, and whether or not and what those financial dollars are if we want to allow for this 12-year, or if we want to set aside a separate area for a section that's just the 8 and 12 everywhere else.
Yeah, and just to share I know that some members of the Economic Development Committee weren't there for the presentation that I gave, but we did that comparison with the Overlook Apartments versus the Paisno Apartments. These are on Mile Hill, so the Overlook Apartments is in the right image here and is directly behind the old movie theater. This had a 12-year exemption, and then the Paisno Apartments was built without any MFTE incentives. And so when we looked at the savings to the developer and the savings to the tenant, so for the Overlook Apartments, the total rent relief to all of the tenants in the 20% of units that were affordable was like $17,000 annually, and that was $2,100 and $2,160 per unit. And the developer was saving over that time about $1 million. And so you're talking about $200,000 in savings to tenants and $1 million in savings to the developer. And so that was, so if you were to increase that 10% of units that are affordable to be 25%, this is going to go up to about $450,000 in savings, and the
Thank you.
savings to the developer would be the same. So that's the magnitude of change that we're talking about. But in terms of giving you projections on, how much,
No, I think this is perfect. I think I would just add one more line and have it be a different color to what it would be with the proposed change,
gotcha. Okay.
if you get what I'm saying. Yep,
Yeah.
perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking at. Okay, Councilmember Fenton.
Yeah, with all these, the new units and the projects, do we have a view ordinance where if, we designate this multifamily tax exemption, and you take an older house and you put it, you make it taller? What about the people in the back who have a view of the sound of the water? So how's that going to play into this?
So we do have a view protection overlay district that is on the hillside above downtown. And the way that district works is that heights are limited below what the zoning allows. And you also then measure that height from the uphill property line. And so the interesting thing is that if you have a site that has a lot of relief, you may actually get more stories than what the underlying zoning allows because you're going down the hill. And it's essentially like treated as daylight basements, but you have a maximum uphill building height that is less than what the zoning allows. So you are going to get shorter buildings in those areas as redevelopment occurs. And then if you're in the shoreline area, under the Shoreline Master Program, there is something in state law that says that shoreline development can't be above 35 feet unless it's adopted in a local code. And when development is proposed, if it blocks a substantial number of residential views, it can be denied. That only applies in areas that are within 200 feet of the shoreline. And so we had that question come up with the 429 Bay Street project at the bottom of Porter Boulevard. And the person who was asking about that, I met with them and explained to them that, look, this is blocking a commercial view, not residential views, and so it's not protected in state law. But the downtown height limits are totally different than the neighborhood height limits once you go further up the hill. And again, there you're measuring from the uphill property line. And I think, Jim, some types of development are limited to 28 feet and some are limited to only 15 feet, depending on which building type it is. And so that's already less than the 35 feet that's allowed in the R2 zone. So you're getting a little bit shorter building, and then you're measuring from the average uphill property elevation.
Yeah. Well, good. I would just be concerned that, it doesn't take away anybody's view of the water, because that would be a decrease in the value of their home.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, views are not considered property rights. You have the ability to buy a view easement, and if you wish to preserve your view, you should be talking to your neighbor and say, "Hey, I would be willing to pay you to grant me a view easement to ensure that my view is never obstructed." And so, an easement is a property right, but as far as city policy, it is hard for us to protect views. We do have a limited policy for protecting views, but we also don't want to limit a property owner's right to use their property. And so I think we have a very modest view protection zoning regulation. But ultimately, if somebody wants to preserve their view and have 100% certainty that they're not going to lose a view, they need to buy a view easement, and that becomes an extension of the property that they own and adds value to their property that can't be lost.
Okay.
Thanks,
Those
Nick.
air rights.
I know an
Big
agent.
thing in the 70s in Seattle, and I know some people that made a lot of money on those air rights in Seattle.
Nick, can you talk a little more about the middle housing? And can you bring up the map? Because the area that I've always been curious about is sort of bounded by, let's say, Sidney and Klein and Tremont and Division, where there are some really nice historic homes, but there's also a mix of houses that have had a lot of deferred maintenance. So with item 6C of the new ordinance for middle housing, Is it possible that someone could renovate an existing house somehow by adding three? So they need to add at least 3 more units to
Mhm.
qualify for an MFT. I'm wondering if that might be a nice way to incentivize this sort of area or parts of this area.
Well, you could certainly do that, but taking a residential building and turning it into 4 units in terms of building code is really difficult because you're moving from the IRC into the IBC, and the code requirements are totally different, and it's very expensive to do something like that, but it's certainly allowed.
Would they, for example, be allowed to just build a triplex and keep the existing house, do you think? Would that be one
Yeah,
way to do
yeah,
it?
I believe our code would allow that now if it's in the R2 or R3 zone.
Okay.
Jim?
Yeah, I was just gonna add that, the R2 district, which the majority of these properties are, that unit density is capped at 4. So you're only going to see 6 units when you get to R3, but most of this area is R2 or some neighborhood mixed use or civic district.
Okay. No, I'm excited that it is a way that perhaps some of these neighborhoods could be revitalized. And I think that would be a justifiable use of the MFTE, because I think they need some sort of incentive to and I like that sort of infill type middle housing. And I wish we had an example of it to point to, but I don't think we do yet.
No, it's been really hard to make that sort of project pencil, but you see it all over in Seattle and Tacoma, Bellevue, and even in I think I've seen a few of those projects in Silverdale, but
And
they're I
Bremerton
think
has
that's why MFTE is such a good tool in Port Orchard for middle housing, is because it seems like we've had a few people kick the tires on projects like that, and they have all pulled out of those projects because it doesn't add up for them, and I think MFTE will make that viable.
I think a local example, the only one I can think of anyway, is right across the street from the high school. I can't remember the developer's name, but I think it's on Dwight and Mitchell.
That's
And
not
it's
the Disney project, is it? No.
no, it wasn't Disney.
It was the same guy that owns Contour. Here, I'll pull it up. But,
James.
Is there an
James something.
aerial?
here it is. So this is the fourplex that was built, and it
Oh,
really,
right.
I
Okay.
think this was actually, these technically would have been townhomes if they had been on their own lot, but there's 4 units in the building here, and this one turned out quite well. But this was a single family lot, and now there are 4 units here, and it's 2 stories. It fits in with the neighborhood and is quite nice across from the high school.
I don't know if it's Sarah, Gary.
What's that?
You're on mute now.
Yep,
You
no,
said
we
you-
hear you, we hear you, go for it.
Oh, I was just going to make a comment that I think the MFTE for projects like this, if you're trying to redevelop an area and give it a fresher, newer look, just like you mentioned, Crawford Lane is a prime example of encouraging development there, which is a blighted area. But to Councilman Chang's point, in some of those other areas, I think it's a really good idea to provide an incentive. So that was my comment.
Thank you. Okay, any last comments on MFTE?
So this is going to come to the city council work study a week from tomorrow. So Jim and I are working to update the map to remove kind of those institutional properties from the map, but largely it will stay the same. Did I hear that the Economic Development Committee would like to see the addition of the Hidden Hills area along Salmonberry? Was everybody on the same page there?
I am.
I would support that.
Okay, we will bring that forward. Maybe, Jim, we can show that as a different color for now and just say the Economic Development Committee recommended this addition. Did you want to look at Diaz Meadows or did you want to leave that out?
I do not. I don't
Okay.
think it's contiguous.
Okay. And then, yeah, so that'll come forward a week from Tuesday.
The only other thing I might suggest, because it helped me when you flipped back and forth, I don't know if we can do a zoned map with this green outline around the zoning, so I can see where it would actually work versus where it wouldn't, that may be too much. If it can be done easily, that I think that would be helpful, but if not, no big deal. Joe, did you have something you wanted to add on NFT?
I just wanted to say that from what I've heard, it seems like folks are thinking in the right direction. There's plenty of opportunity and need for redevelopment in Port Orchard to raise the bar, and this seems like a good tool to do it. And we also know that it is difficult to build, right? In Washington, costs have escalated, inflation's escalated. And this can help get some things done in our community where we need these things done. So excited by your conversation and supportive of the MFT.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Director Bond. Let's talk pre-app meetings.
I guess that's also me. We have had two pre-apps that I wanted to report on, and I'm going to share my screen here. The first one is pretty exciting. It has to do with redeveloping the old movie theater on Mile Hill.
Nice.
We had a proposal come in that would convert that building to both a dance and gymnastics studio. And so they would basically build, right now those are sloped floors in the old theater, so they have to like level out the interior of the building. There's quite a bit of demo work that would be done, but there would be one large gymnastics area and then several individual dance studios that would make this, bring the building back to life. So it also lists that there's some public event space, which I don't know exactly what that entails. There's a small cafe near the entrance. So anyway, this would become a pretty active space. And I think we had a productive meeting, and it sounds like they are, Jim, I don't know if you have any insight, but I think we answered most of their questions, and we're hoping that this thing will move forward.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's super exciting. Number
Big-
one, it's been a while. I know my business looked at that property, that there are some challenges with it. So to find that they have a way forward. And I don't think there's any shortage of needing space for things for our youth to do. So I think this is a win-win-win. Councilmember Chang?
Do you know how many pickleball courts could fit in that gymnastics area?
I don't know the square footage of a pickleball court off the top of my head, but I'm guessing probably 4 to 5.
Yeah, yeah, I would guess so too. Cool. All right. What else you got?
So the other one, we actually had this as a pre-application meeting maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and the owners are back looking at this. This is on Pottery Avenue, right where the Pottery goes underneath Highway 16, and so this is the north side of 16. Highway 16 is diagonal across the map here. So this is just a small 24-unit apartment project just south of the middle school, and they've reconfigured the site to meet our design standards compared to what we saw the first time they submitted this. And whether they will go forward or not, I'm not sure. But we met with them, and I think eventually something like this is going to happen here. It's just a matter of when.
That whole area seems to be getting some attention there. Have you heard more from the people doing the storage facility?
Well, they're putting in the sewer line right now, so
That's them. That's okay.
Yeah, they're extending the gravity sewer up Pottery to be available to serve their project. So I assume with that investment, they will be going forward.
And then when do we start our part of that project?
So we've awarded the contract.
Okay.
The developer contracted with the city's contractor to do the sewer line, and so that needs to go in first. But I think the contractor is working on stormwater and other things at the same time they're putting in some sewer line.
Okay, perfect. Commissioner Anderson.
Speaking of that, so when is Kitsap Transit going to put in their sewer pump station on the property to serve the Sedgwick Sydney intersection?
That is very close to a complete design. They have asked for a latecomer agreement before they will build that. I believe next year they're going to break ground on the park and ride. They just resubmitted they had to revise some permit drawings, and we were meeting with them about some minor design changes to the park and ride itself. And I don't know. I think the sewer lift station goes in at the end of the park and ride project because that is because of funding sources, and they have to use the federal money on the park and ride, and then other money on the sewer lift station to serve those development pads.
That piece of property that you showed us with the 24-unit apartment project, that was previously zoned in institutional. That must have got rezoned then.
No, it's been residential for quite a while, I think, because I think 5 years ago when we met with them, it was allowed at that location.
Yeah, it's been R4 for quite some time.
Boy, I worked on that a few. I'm probably divulging my age when I said I worked on that some time ago and it was zoned institutional, so that probably goes back too far.
Yeah, maybe so. I know that obviously the middle school to the north is institutional, and so this is just a very small triangle at the tip of that.
Yep. Yeah, I know the property.
Anything else? Director Bond?
That's all I've got for pre-application meetings for now.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate the update. Good of the order. Let's start with my council members. Good?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? It looked like Joe maybe had something.
Oh, yes. This is directed for you, Board Member Morrissey and Board Member Anderson. September 18th, we're having our board retreat up at the Point Hotel and Casino for Kitsap EDA. I think we'll tackle a couple things related to the economy, and we'll tackle a couple things related to our organization. So hope you both can make it. It's always a good experience. Appreciate your input.
Yeah, it's on the calendar. Anybody else?
Well, I just wanted to share, I had to pull back up the MFTE map, but the Pottery Apartments I was just showing you is in the MFTE area. And so right now, that project is proposed as a 3-story, 24-unit project. And so if they took that to a 4-story project, and it would be 32 units, we would get more units, they would get MFTE. And so this is a perfect example of how MFTE could be used to get a slightly more valuable project. So,
Or if they added underground parking.
or yeah, and whether they can actually rent these units with the amount of parking they're showing, or whether they can squeeze in additional parking to meet the market demand for parking, is to be determined. But yeah, I think that's exactly why we designed it the way we have. Is we're getting the 3-story projects proposed without MFTE in place, and this would hopefully get us a project that after, I think we said after 17 years, the city actually would end up way ahead in terms of property tax revenue if there wasn't a tax shift. But because of the tax shift, we're coming out ahead from day one, really.
And how long? When did that project start?
Which one?
This particular one. When
Oh, I have no idea. They only had a pre-app meeting, so they would have to apply for permits. So.
So you hadn't talked to them a couple of years before?
We talked to them
like
6 years ago, and they came back in with a pretty similar proposal to what they had before. But whether they actually file an application or not is to be determined. But I would certainly reach out to them if we approve MFTE and say, hey, we've approved MFTE. You may want to consider making this a 4-story building because you can qualify for tax incentives, and see if they're interested in that.
Yeah. How would parking go for that if we put it up for 4 stories?
Well, we only require, they're providing more parking than what our code requires already. So they wouldn't have to expand the parking lot. But if they don't think they can rent the units because they don't have enough parking, that's something that they may choose to provide. But that ultimately is up to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm always just curious, especially with knowing that there's, a park and ride, more public transit infrastructure going in that side of town. We are definitely seeing development along that corridor.
Mm-hmm.
So nice work, nice planning, all of the above.
All right.
Anything else, team? Appreciate it. I think it was great dialogue today. I think we gave some input. Look forward to seeing this next week, Director Bond and team. If there is nothing else, going once, twice, it's 9:27. We will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.